So at this point, I'll move on to the next subject, next item in the agenda, regulatory updates, and I'll start with Section 106. As I announced to you all last week in an email, which I am very, very glad to see that made it beyond our membership and out into the general public, as I assumed it would. So thank you all for accomplishing what I thought would probably happen. In that email, for those that haven't seen it, I expressed my view to the membership that I believe it's time to take a close look at our Section 106 regulations to determine how they may be updated to address modern needs and demands. As many of you know that watch this space, the Senate Committee on Environment and Natural Resources met last October to take a careful look at how Section 106 review process is working. In that discussion and in plenty of discussions prior and afterwards, there were a number of areas identified where improvements could be made. Moreover, this administration has directed agencies across the federal government to take decisive action towards streamlining their regulations that are on the book with a view of particular view in the environmental and permitting space. That begun early last year with a number of executive actions that have prompted that the president issued the first day in office and has carried forward throughout the past year. Now that we're a year into this administration, and it's 22 years since these regulations were last revised, I believe it's a great time to get to work. I know that Section 106 regulations are important to a broad array of stakeholders and to the American public themselves. I'm here today to mark my intention to make them work better, to improve and streamline them, and to make them into a continued useful tool as this country moves forward. I recognize that there are stakeholders in the public and that are very involved in this, and they deserve an opportunity to inform this effort, and I know we will benefit from their effort during the regulatory process. In our experience over the past 22 years, there's been a number of areas that have been identified where improvements should and must be explored. Some of those areas were marked out in the message that I sent you recently, and more are provided in the meeting book paper that came out the day after my message. Knowing this is a topic that you all care about, that's partly why each of you has a seat at this table. I do want to open the floor to hear about your interest, initial thoughts that you have, and how these regulations are working and how best to guide our efforts moving forward. I would ask that you be guided, though not necessarily constrained, by the questions that are in the meeting book. After we bring these interests to surface, I will then share my preferences of what that path forward may look like in this effort. As with almost every single other agenda item, you are free to email, call me, staff, to talk through this. And Reid and Kelly here are great resources on this issue. I am going to turn it over to Reid to let him briefly summarize these questions and go into a little bit more detail of our thoughts behind that and why we included them in the email to start generating some of these thoughts. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And our technicians always remind me to remind you all when you speak on this topic to speak into your microphone if at all possible, so our recording of this event is as clear as possible, and to state your name to begin with. So real quickly, as the Vice Chairman indicated, I just wanted to summarize for you so you don't necessarily have to be pulling your meeting book paper and the email from the Vice Chairman together as we talk about this topic. Just real quickly, some things perhaps to guide this discussion. First, I think we would certainly like you to consider, could the Section 106 regulations, or of course portions thereof, be streamlined to more effectively achieve the statutory objectives of the NHPA? And if so, where? What sort of changes should be made? Are there any portions of the regulations that are difficult to interpret or have become perhaps unnecessary, ineffective, or ill-advised? We would love to hear your thoughts on that. Have the Section 106 regulations or any portion of them become outdated? If so, how can we modernize them to better accomplish the statutory objectives of the NHPA? Are there any new technologies that can be leveraged to modify or streamline the Section 106 regulations? We'll talk a little bit more about that later in this meeting. I hope your answer is a resounding yes. What additional information should the ACHP collect regarding the Section 106 review process? As you might know, the current regulations give us very little authority to collect information about the 106 process. And if there should be some additions to our ability to do that, where should those be made? Are the Section 106 regulations or any part of them inconsistent with any current executive orders or directives issued by the President? If so, how should we fix that? I would also just note real quickly, as the Vice Chairman indicated, his email the day before this meeting book came out sort of highlighted a number of areas that I think the members should be encouraged to sort of dig into. And some of these are issues that were also discussed at the Senate hearing that the Vice Chairman referenced. Those are, real quickly, 4 of them: defining undertakings and establishing areas of potential effect. We know there are a lot of questions and thoughts and in some ways concerns about how those processes work out. Assessing indirect and cumulative effects. Managing the review or scope of a review for long linear projects with limited federal involvement. We know that's an important and sort of a hot topic, if you will. And then finally, managing timelines for Section 106 reviews. So that's just a quick summary to help facilitate the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Reid. I'd like to now talk about the path moving forward. Well, actually, I think we can open that up for discussion. Sorry, got a little ahead of myself here, not reading my own notes. So at this point, I will open it up. I have additional thoughts on path forward. Gave you a little preview there of what that looks like in terms of process and involvement from the council. So if really we want to focus this little period right now on what Reid just walked through of like substance of 106. If you have process questions, whether regulatory process, council process, Kelly and I will address that here kind of once this discussion session concludes. So at this point, I'll open up the floor. All right.
Ira Matt, NAFPO. Thank you for that reminder, Reid. I actually put it in my talking points here. I think to get to the meat of the matter there, yeah, I think they can be improved. Whether you call that streamline or further informing, clarifying, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think this comes just from how the Section 106 process has unfolded over the years. And I'm going to be speaking more directly to tribes and Native Hawaiians. But for folks who may not be aware, National Historic Preservation Act itself, 1966, was the height of the termination era. Even when that was drafted, there was no intention to include Indian tribes because there wasn't an intent for the federal government to have that responsibility to tribes. There were amendments in 92 to incorporate Indian tribes, was prior to self-governance in 94. And while it authorized the TIPOs and it was forward-seeking, TIPOs themselves didn't hit the streets until 96. There were 12 of us, my tribe being one of the original 12. I would like to extend a thank you now to the great Navajo Nation who went around and helped support many of those tribes in the development of those initial preservation offices to ensure success. But as you noted, it's been a couple decades since the regulations were updated. And a number of those substantive updates happened really between 99 and 01, if I got those years correct, Reid. And even at that time, there was very few tribal preservation officers out doing the work and little potential for it to influence the language and the regulations, which means at the time, they were still forward-looking on what could be. We're at a great point now where tribes have a number of various programs, whether they've assumed tribal preservation officer functions or developed their programs independently that can help inform how we can make a more efficient and effective 106 process. So I know that was a bit long, but I got a little bit of a statement here, and then I'm going to talk about the importance of the consultation. But for number one, I want to say that any changes to 106, they need to produce real change in federal behavior. We've been in a bit of a rut for a while, and things need to change. Updates need to ensure that consultation with tribes happen early enough to actually shape decisions, and that it's conducted in a manner that respects sovereignty and the rights that the tribes hold under the National Historic Preservation Act, which are very specific. Streamlining shouldn't be used to bypass tribes or narrow any of the protections for sacred sites, or really treat harm as acceptable just because timelines are tight. They need to reinforce the obligation that federal agencies have to identify and consider, and this is the language from the statute, properties of traditional, religious, and cultural importance to tribes. And importantly, we need to seek to ensure that Indigenous knowledge is treated as essential evidence in this work, because while it is an aside from the regulations, the Secretary of Interior's professional qualification standards recognize archaeologists, architectural historians, they do not recognize tribes as experts in their own culture. But we could seek to do something like that in the regulations that could streamline this process quite a bit. But I think it's important for a lot of members here to recognize, and I know we have a few experts here, Suda and Shurer, that could speak to this if they would like, but the significance this is going to have for Indian tribes, not only on how we engage off-reservation, but how these regulations are going to shape potential operations day-to-day on tribal lands. Updates to Part 800 can affect how tribal programs are designed, how land management decisions are made, and how tribes carry out our administrative responsibilities tied to protecting these cultural places. And so because of that reality, the process for revising these regulations needs to be guided by the time and the effort needed for tribal governance, not just tribal historic preservation officers, but tribal leadership to be fully involved, to be briefed on these matters, to be able to coordinate and collaborate internally, both on the implications this could have on tribal lands, but also off tribal lands. And I bring that up because frequently folks are used to programmatic agreements. You're talking about off-reservation impacts, or you're talking about a very specific jurisdictional impact. This has broad influence on how tribes need to be able to engage. So with that, I just want to note that NAFPO, we're here to support this effort, including trying our best to coordinate with our members to generate some specific information to further inform this effort. I'll stop right there before I get into all the little specific ideas I have on how we could improve it. But I do want to say, what was it, Reid, a couple years ago, former chairman Sarah Bronin took a look at this effort internally with staff. I know a number of recommendations were generated at that time on how these could be improved, the regulations. And so if any of those records are still available, information generated by staff may kick this thing off and help move it along in a more efficient manner. But I'll yield the floor to other members.
Thank you, Ira. Any other comments?
Thank you. Ann Rains, NICSHPO. I will note that our SHPOs in the 59 states, territories have had our eye on this issue for some time. It's no surprise that this is coming up and being taken up by the ACHP. Our members have watched the relevant congressional hearings, taken notes, and we know sort of where the conversation is, even if we're not surprised by all of it. So we've established internally a Section 106 working group of SHPOs, deputy SHPOs, and their staff who have longstanding expertise with the program and have established mechanisms for taking feedback from our, I'll say it again, 59 members, so that we can get feedback from across that spectrum and bring that to the table here. And I'll note that just like every federal agency deals with multiple SHPOs, every SHPO deals with multiple federal agencies, and we deal with submissions on a 30-day clock. It's important to remember that SHPOs don't approve, they consult. We take that role seriously as the voice of the states, and we know that other consulting parties value their role in the process as well. So thank you. We look forward to participating in the conversation.
Thank you, Ann. Any other comments, questions? Emily?
So as the representative, I think, here for the project developers who often initiate projects that undergo reviews under Section 106, I think it's really important for us to be an observer here on this council because we can represent that broader community that has to make these work. I'd really encourage the council to think about ways as we revise these regulations to standardize this process so it is more consistent across agencies and across different project types. I know speaking for the Permitting Council, our team is made up of experts who have served at Department of Interior, the U.S. Army Corps, across the government with decades of experience implementing regulations, and every Section 106 consultation we do is different. It's very difficult to give consistent information to project developers on how the process will proceed, on what they need to do to comply, and on how they can best, frankly, be responsive to the communities you all represent here in this room. So I would really encourage the group to consider how we make this a process that is more predictable for our project developers so they truly can comply with the law, comply with the regulations, and meet the needs of this community.
Thanks, Emily.
Yes. Thank you, Emily. I'd like to follow up on that with two unrelated comments. One, regarding permitting. My husband works in oil and gas, so I took the opportunity to talk to his regulatory manager of his company about the Section 106 process, what could be changed, how they implement it with NEPA. She just sees it like NEPA and 106 altogether. Like, we're going someplace new. We have to do all the surveys, et cetera. But I would strongly recommend using industry to provide comments back on this because they're the ones going to the permits and getting this. So I think the input from industry, I suggested Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, who has a long career in the energy development. The other comment is from the grassroots level, and I would strongly consider maintaining and encouraging opportunities for local citizen input and participation to comment in the 106 process, because often it's the local community and the citizens who are there at that grassroots level who best understand solutions for best implementing the 106 and considering opportunities to avoid adverse effects. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kristin, Thomasgard, Department of War. First of all, thank you for opening this up for conversation. This is something that Department of War supports very much, is very much in line with other initiatives that we're pursuing. I think streamlining would be top of our list in terms of substantive opportunities to look at the regulations, opportunities to better define no potential to cause effects. Would be helpful as well. And I think the last thing I'll mention is an opportunity to look at allowing agencies to rely upon previous consultations for substantially similar projects. Very much look forward to continuing to discuss this, and we will likely provide some additional comments as we move forward. But thank you.
Thank you, Kristin.
John Fowler, ACHP Foundation. I would want to just sort of remind the members that the Section 106 regs are government-wide regulations, and they apply to, an interstate pipeline. They apply to a Corps of Engineers permit for a boat dock in a lake. And so when you look at the regulations, you need to have something. You need to come up with a product that can be applied government-wide. At the same time, we have lots of tools in the regulations to modify and apply the process to the specific cases of or the circumstances of different projects of different scales. But I think it's and we also have to recognize that there are tools outside of the regulatory framework itself in the way of guidance and other kinds of informative, interpretive documents that can apply the process to these specific situations. So I don't think we should be looking simply at the regulations, but look at everything that's in the toolbox. The other thing that I think is important to consider when you are looking at the regulations is the problem the regulation, or is the problem the carrying out of the responsibilities of the regulation? There are timelines in the current regulations that limit the time a preservation authority, an Indian tribe, an SHPO, the public, and so on, has to comment or consult on a specific project. There are no timelines for the federal agency. And I would suggest that as you look at how projects unfold, that the difficulty is not an SHPO failing to meet a 30-day timeline. It's what does the agency do with the response that it gets and move on to the next step. So I think it's very important that through your process that you really home in on what are the causes of the problems. Is it the regulation, or is it the way it's being carried out? And should there be other kinds of recommendations coming out of this regulatory review process that may have to do with investment in federal agencies, in trained staff to do the work that needs to be done?
Thank you. Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Carol Quillen. I represent the National Trust for Historic Preservation. In some sense, echoing what John said, first of all, we support this review. We'd very much like to be a part of any working group that's established to review Section 106. I think it's important to review these regulations. I also think it's important to get clarity on the problem or problems that we're trying to solve, and to base that analysis on data. And I can say, as someone who's comparatively new to the field of preservation, I've heard wildly conflicting stories about the impact of Section 106. And if it's possible to get data on timelines and where the holdup is, and to define with clarity and in a kind of consensus way where the bottlenecks are and what the problems are we're trying to solve, I think this group will come up with amazing recommendations for the process. So that's just, a suggestion on how we go about it. And then what I have learned in my time at the Trust is that often through a consultative process, however it takes place, whenever it takes place, we end up with a better project. We end up with a project that's actually a win-win and that accomplishes way more than an initial design might have. So in addition to getting clarity on the problems we're trying to solve and to collecting accurate data on where the holdups are and where the frustrations are for those seeking permits, I think it would be good to think through when consultation could happen that would be most likely to result in a win-win outcome.
Thank you. Any other?
Yes, Rick Gonzalez, expert member. And under strategic goal number 1, we mentioned timely, efficient, effective, and fully engaged. Our mayor also mentioned public value and benefit, which is at the end of the day what it's really all about. The whole idea, I think, of as a practicing architect and watching this for 40 years and being involved with the Historic Commission for 16 years, is that at the end of the day, most states, most counties and cities and CLGs simply don't have the expertise available, right? They're running on empty, right? They're dealing with consultants, with developers and others, that are trying to get their bridge approved or whatever the project might be and the impact on the historic resources of a place. And we are about public value and benefit, right, for those that have the least representation. The Federal 106 is like an umbrella, right, that's overseeing and working with all of the 59 states and with the TIPOs to help the counties and the cities and the CLGs to get to that public person that is impacted by this. So I just hope that we don't forget that at the end of the day. Yes, there's too much regulation, working with someone that's always fighting regulation at every level. I see it firsthand. So let's do both things. Let's streamline, because we need to do that. But let's not forget that at the end of the day, it's for, your local neighborhood group that's trying to figure out the impact of a project on their community.
Thanks, Reid. Any other questions or comments?
Good morning, Patrice Fry with Repurpose Capital, and I just want to weigh in and say that I fully embrace and support any effort to really update and modernize preservation policy and practice. I see the importance of that throughout my own work. And I want to echo a couple of the comments that have been made around, I actually, jumping ahead, I think the program comment from the Department of War is interesting in that it identifies similarities in building typology and the opportunity to really streamline projects based on their similarity to other projects. And I think that offers a lot of promise moving forward.
Thank you. Yep.
Stephanie Paul, NAPC, but I appreciate the comments, and many are reflective of what we are looking for as well. We do want to be a part of this process, appreciate the process, but we also want to make sure the local voice is heard and has the opportunity through that's not streamlined out of the consultation process, and they're often the ones that know the community best, know the projects, and can be the most helpful at the community level. I think it's good to look at the challenges of 106 and looking through the streamlining, but it's also go to revisit and do a review of the benefits and what it has done. So I think it's good to look back and where the successes have been there. Other ways looking at Section 1 could be streamlined. If maybe the federal agencies were consistent in working and getting the information, and I think we were looking at timelines and how we can all work together to keep those timelines tighter and getting everything to the commissions and the local parties. But we appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.
John Fowler, ACHP Foundation. As an observer, I'd just like to make one more observation. The Section 106 process really is an exemplar of the federal system, and it's a real opportunity for state and local government, tribal governments, nonprofit groups, citizens, businesses, and stakeholders to have a voice and a seat at the table in federal decision-making that affects the historic resources in their community. And I would hope that the members, as you look at regulatory revisions and improvements, that you think about this in the regulations in that context. It's not a heavy-handed imposition of government standards on private activity. It comes through the federal action that is being subjected to the 106 process, and the outcome ends up reflecting through consultation the views of all those stakeholders. And I think you need to look at the process in a slightly different way than one's immediate reaction to government regulation. I mean, this really is an opportunity for the people that care about their historic resources to have a voice in federal decision-making, even though the decision in the end is the federal agencies.
Thanks, John. Any other comments? Ira.
Hi, Michael Bowes, representative of the general public, and I'm new to this agency. But one thing I would take note of are Section 106 regulations take up 25 pages in the Code of Federal Regulations. I mean, my experience over the years is that many agencies' regulations run hundreds and hundreds of pages, and ours are 25 pages. So if we can streamline them, I think that would be fantastic. But I note that they're really not that long and lengthy.
Thank you, Michael. Ira.
Ira Matt, Nathpo. I just want to say, I think there's a lot of great synergy here, and folks are all saying a lot of the same things. And actually, I want to start by kind of anchoring what I wanted to do. I was going to get in specifics, but I want to tie together what a lot of folks have been talking about, really starting over here with the permitting council, right? standardizing, predictability. That's what this is supposed to be about. That's what tribes are after. They want predictability in this process. And it's been a challenge. And going over to the foundation, Mr. Fowler over there, I think there was a lot of great discussion too. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. There's a lot of great tools. How can we improve what exists in this? And Mr. Bowe has also pointed out this isn't a lot of information, and I think for those of us who have been around for a long time, I feel like, and that's why I mentioned with streamlining, I don't know if it's necessarily reducing as much as it is bringing in clarity to the process. And when you hear about the win-win discussion Carol had brought up, and you think back to that environmental and natural resources hearing, and even that environmental and public works hearing, one of the consistencies that folks brought in there was that early informed consultation created more informed, better projects. It allowed the least amount of impact and the greatest amount of predictability for projects. I've seen this from the tribal side. I've been a consultant for energy. I've been on the federal side. And it's not necessarily about having to meet with the various partners out there. It's not even about committing to doing the work. It's about not knowing how long things are going to take. And I do agree, federal timelines can be a big part of that. Because how many times, for those that have been around this business enough, you do things under your timeline, and then 6 months go by, a year goes by, you don't hear from a federal agency, you got business to manage. You invest yourself elsewhere, and then something shows up in the mail, and the federal agency needs it now. It's inconsistent with making sure, I think as Mr. Gonzalez pointed out, that we're able to have voices and representation in this process. And so when I look at it, and I think for folks who might not know, this is procedural. It's sequential, but it's ultimately compounding to move through the 106 process as you go from identification and documentation to evaluation, assessment, and agreements. So if you don't have that first initial start, that solid foundation, things are going to get challenging as you move along. But the documentation standards that are within the regulations, those really only identify what needs to be done at the very end. Could these be improved or further informed to help identify what needs to happen in that sequential process for federal agencies to move through? And I think, as the Department of War noted, relying on previous consultation would be great. If we had documentation standards that captured all the information so that those future undertakings, those future projects could look back and have information they knew was vetted and informed, that would be a reality for this process. So when you look at it through that manner, and I'm hearing about what everybody's talking, I think there's some great opportunities, but one of the baseline things I've always had, working with tribes, working as a federal preservation officer for agencies, it's making sure that you have knowledgeable professionals. And if you don't, you've got to have enough clarity on what's needed for people to be able to advance and meet the needs of not only their interests, but the advisory council. You should have that picture up from your training, the table, and everybody sitting around the table, because this isn't about one person advancing, one agency getting what they want. It's about having a collective and informed process as you advance these projects forward. So I just wanted to say, from everything I'm hearing here, I think there's a lot of great opportunity. And outside all my specifics, I think looking at documentation standards provides an opportunity to create a more informed expectation of federal agencies as they move through each step of the process. And that can, of course, be leveraged for other opportunities. But that's it for me.
Thanks, Ira. Any other comments?
Kyle Shearer. I would just hope that whatever process you're considering for thinking about Section 106 revisions, just ensure that contains opportunities for meaningful consultation with tribes and ANCs, and that's the government-to-government consultation, obviously not the Section 106 consultation. 300 plus. Tribes, don't have TIPOs, and they may have, concerns that Ira, is not necessarily representing, although he's doing a fantastic job, carrying the water for TIPOs.
Thanks, Kyle. Any other comments? All right. Thank you all. That was tremendously helpful. While I was not taking notes, I know this is being recorded, so I will go back and do that. But what I will say is everything that we talked about today has been resonating in conversations that we've been having on this. So nothing today was said that was unexpected, but I think it is a good sets us up on a good path forward of working together on a council on this. I would like to talk about the path forward. It's important to me that the process of, as we go through this analysis and updating of the regulations, move forward deliberately and without delay. I'm going to turn to Kelly here to remind us of the steps necessary in any regulatory update, and particularly I'd ask Kelly to overview the interaction and process set up with OMB and OIRA as part of any effort.
Sure.
Kelly.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So as you all, I'm sure, are well aware, any rulemaking effort that we undertake at this juncture would be subject to the Administrative Procedure Act, and as such, there are specific requirements for public participation, providing adequate notice of a proposed rule, and allowing for a meaningful opportunity to comment. This is typically achieved through the Federal Register notice, through a Federal Register notice, multiple of those. And then once that adequate notice is provided, the agency, of course, must provide interested persons with the opportunities to submit written data, views, or arguments in response. So in addition to the APA requirements that we will be working very closely with OMB and OIRA on, the Advisory Council is also subject to several executive orders that will influence and impact this effort. The first being 12866, that's sort of the overarching executive order that creates the framework for reviewing significant federal regulations. That would require us, as we've actually just done this week, to submit a notice to the Unified Federal Agenda. And it's simply a placeholder, if you will, that the agency intends to take some sort of rulemaking action. It is not a commitment to any specific changes, nor to any actual specific action along changing the regulations, substance or procedural, but it is to put the public on notice that we intend to start. So just a heads up, that will go live probably next week, so you may get questions. Other executive orders that we are keeping tabs on, of course, 14192, the deregulatory executive order, just tracking how this effort would line up with any others. And a very important one that the Vice Chair just referenced, and I think what Kyle was mentioning, Executive Order 13175, which requires consultation with Indian tribes for any action that would have a significant impact. It is obviously, as you've heard today, very likely any sort of effort to revise 106 regulations would have that impact. And in fact, in our agency's implementation plan for the executive order, we identify any rulemaking action as triggering that executive order's requirements. Additionally, the Advisory Council has a trust responsibility to Indian tribes that we will also fulfill in this effort. So needless to say, I think we're going to have a lot of discussion, timing, process, consultation opportunities, working with both tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations across the board. That's in addition to, of course, the public outreach that we mentioned, both required under the APA and also fulfilling our mission and our sort of best standard practice, not only engaging with the public, but our other stakeholders, our SHPO partners, other local governments, counties, all the folks that we normally bring in, industry, project proponents. So we will fold all this into those requirements and make sure that we hit all those points in a meaningful and reasonable way.
Thank you, Kelly. Recognizing that much work to get us to the point of having any updated regulation would require a great amount of time and effort in between our regular business meetings. It is my intent to form an advisory group, task force, whatever the terminology is that Reid had told us about earlier, of members to assist me and staff in advancing this effort. This is not meant to limit any other staff any other members from providing input as we move along, but just clarifying that this advisory group would not be granted any authority to act on behalf of the entire council in terms of your actual role, but would instead kind of be expected to roll up their sleeves and assist with analyzing information compiled by staff, advising on areas needing attention or adjustment, and developing draft recommendations for further discussion. Through this process and in between any meetings, as we go through the potential entire process, I pledge to regularly update members and engage with you through our variety of different informational meetings that we can set up outside of a formal business meeting. Please know the advisory group, it is my intention to keep that at a member designee level, so we can make decisions and recommendations and move along in the process. But like I said earlier, that doesn't take away the ability of anyone serving on the council to provide input. I know that many of y'all have, in your comments in the earlier discussion, expressed interest. I would love for any of those that are interested in serving in this group moving forward. Please feel free to email me and Reid by February 20th so that we can get a group set up and move forward in that.
I want to just add one quick thing. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention earlier, but in light of the Vice Chair's comments, just so you all are aware, any actual publication of a draft rule, of course, of the final rule, would require a vote of the entire membership. So keep in mind, subcommittee work is obviously going into the deliberations, but it has no voting or approval power that is retained by the membership itself.
And just a vote would occur before any draft regulation is even sent to OMB for consideration.
Correct.
So I'll just reiterate that if you do have an expressed interest, please shoot me and Reid an email before February 20th, and we'll take the next steps after that. And again, I know many of you provided great public comment here today on your thoughts. Feel free to follow that up with those here. And if you want to set up separate discussions, we can make time for that as well. John?
John Fowler, ACHP Foundation. In my role as Ghost of Christmas Past, having overseen the ACHP's revision of its regulations from 1999 to 2004, I would like to encourage the council to be vigorous in its outreach to stakeholder groups. We made a major effort back then to reach out to industry, to a wide range of local government groups and so on and so forth. And I think it's important that we move beyond the mere requirements of the APA and these executive orders and really get a good record of what are the issues and what are the solutions. And I hope perhaps with the enhanced resources you have, although I know they're committed to other necessary things, perhaps you can get some of the staff out on the road to talk to people and listen to people.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I will provide more information as we set up the working group on what that then timeline looks like moving forward. But like I said, we've been eager to fill out the council with the membership over the past year. So now that you're here, we're ready to get to work. So looking forward to engaging with you all in a very meaningful way moving forward on this effort.